They fought for social change. They fought against tyrants. They fought for human rights. Yet behind these achievements are individuals who waged a more personal war. They fought the struggle against mental illness, and they won.
For millions of years, they ruled the earth, and then they vanished. What really caused the dinosaurs to become extinct? Was it a giant asteroid crashing to Earth? Was it massive volcanoes erupting around the world? Was it a sudden change in climate? Or was it that they just weren't financially prepared to live out their later years? How can you avoid the dinosaurs' fate? By making U.S. savings bonds part of your retirement savings program. Ask your banker or employer. U.S. savings bonds, the safe and easy way to make sure you're financially prepared for your later years.
Hi, I'm Pamela Foster, author of Ridgeline. You're watching Fayetteville Public Access Television.
Hi, 5 years ago, one of the worst disasters ever hit the United States occurred when Hurricane Katrina hit the southern United States. And particularly hard hit was New Orleans. With us today is Paul Harris, who survived that hurricane. And in fact, you were in the dome, infamous dome in New Orleans.
Yes, thank you. I was traveling to New Orleans on vacation.
Now, this wasn't your first trip to New Orleans, though.
No, I had been about 6 times before. First time in 1977, just traveling Greyhound bus pass. But I had arrived this time 2 days before the Superdome was filled with people.
Yeah, no, what were you doing? Why were you in New Orleans, though, this time?
Just vacation.
Yeah.
Just vacation. It's one of my favorite cities in the U.S.
Now, you were at the Hotel St. Pierre?
Hotel St. Pierre on Burgundy Street in the Quarter.
So what was it like when you knew the storm was coming?
Okay. Well, first, I arrived Friday night, the 28th, or
Right.
26th. The New Orleans Saints were playing football, an exhibition game
Right.
in the Superdome. At that time, Katrina was in Florida. There was no idea they would be headed towards New Orleans.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Saturday that they had an idea.
Right.
The sky was partly cloudy. As soon as Nagin issued his mandatory evacuation.
That was the mayor, yeah.
That was on Sunday at 10 a.m. I took a cab immediately to Amtrak Greyhound. It's a combined station. Cabbie said, "It looks like they're closed." And I said, "No way, that's not possible."
Right, now if there's a mandatory evacuation, how could they close the train station?
Right, right. So I later learned that they had closed Amtrak, Greyhound, and the airport the day before the evacuation. So there were a lot of us who couldn't get out.
That's insane.
Yeah, exactly. So I walked about a quarter mile over to the Superdome. I was probably about the 400th person inside.
That just seems insane to close your routes out of town.
Exactly.
Which is not something really that's talked about very much when they talk about people getting out of town. Because people say, well, there's buses out of town, there's trains out of town, but really a lot of people don't know that
Right.
you couldn't get out of town.
Right. And I still don't know who made those decisions, but you would think leave them open a few more hours after the
Right.
evacuation at least.
So when you were walking toward the dome that day, was there just long line of people going with you in that direction, or?
I was alone at the time. I got there, police officer directed me to the other side of the dome. There were maybe 100 people there. They said that they would start letting people in at noon. I then went to an ATM, got out as much money as I could, went to a vending machine, got some sodas, came back, and then by then it was about 400 people. And in a few hours, when they finally did let us in late, it was maybe 1,000 people in line to get in.
What was the weather like at that point?
It was still partly cloudy. You wouldn't have had any idea that a hurricane was coming.
It was probably hot, though.
It's warm, it's humid, probably 90 degrees.
Yeah. So, people inside the dome, what was it like? I mean, how many people can it hold comfortably?
They actually had a Rolling Stones concert that held 87,000 people.
Okay.
I think that was the largest.
Yeah.
Normally for a football game, probably about 60 to 70.
Yeah.
At its maximum, I would guess there were about 25,000 of us in there.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, they weren't letting us go up to the upper levels. They restricted that, maybe because it was darker at night, and with limited staffing of National Guardsmen, they
Right, no security?
couldn't cover.
Right.
Yeah.
So where were you? Where were you in the dome then?
I went, like I said, I was about 400th person in there.
Yeah.
I hung out with 2 local guys. We staked out our chairs. It wasn't the 50-yard line, but probably the 20-yard line. Looked like a good place, good seats, and we each had a couple of seats to lay down on. That was for the first 3 nights there.
How long did you think you'd be there when you got to the dome?
A day, really,
Yeah.
really a day.
So when it got to be longer and longer, what were you thinking?
Every fear in my mind
Yeah.
took over. I was there Sunday night, then Monday morning around 6:20 was when the 2 portions of the ceiling blew off, and that was very scary.
Tell me about that. What was that like?
It was pretty quiet when the hurricane was going on, but when that happened, then you heard the whole storm. And we thought, this dome was built to withstand 150-mile-an-hour winds,
Right.
and if it blew off those parts, why wouldn't other parts start blowing off? And then
Right.
metal raining down on us, decapitating us.
Right.
And there was a lot of praying, a lot of silence. People were scared at that point. A lot of rain was not coming in because it was blowing horizontally, but some
Yeah.
people who were sitting in that section had to move.
Yeah.
At that point, people were getting along well, but the first fears started to take over. And then, of course, the levees didn't break till the following day, so there was no worry about any of the flooding. It was just the hurricane, and it moved on. They would serve us meals, the MREs, military ready-to-eat rations, bottled water. People were cooperating.
Right.
So
it's still pretty organized.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was it like? How much communication was there with the outside world?
From our standpoint, 0. We didn't even know you guys knew we were in there. That's
Really?
the desperation, the feeling that we thought. I saw on Tuesday one reporter from a local TV station, but she was kept behind the barricades. Never saw Brian Williams in there. I wish I would have. And
Yeah.
I saw one journalist inside. That was it. We kept getting communication from the National Guards that the buses were coming, and they never came. They never
Right.
came. Our only communication really was a few people in the dome who brought their boom boxes, and there was 1 or 2 local radio stations that were broadcasting, but that was mainly calls for desperation, please, after the levees broke.
Right.
People save me, I'm at La Rock Street, that kind of thing.
What about the National Guardsmen? Did they seem frustrated?
Very, very frustrated. They were, several of them said they were upset that they were so understaffed, probably 400 people
Yeah.
to cover 25,000 people, and that all of our resources were in Iraq.
Yeah.
They knew they had to stay in there as long as we
Right.
did till we were all out.
Right.
And there was very little communication, very little leadership.
So they were just as out of communication range as you guys were, weren't they?
At best we could tell, yes, yeah. And they would say, we don't know what's going on, we don't know what's going on, we don't know anything more than you know.
Yeah. When the mood started to change, what was that like?
After we kind of got that feeling that, 1, you guys don't know we're here, 2, there's no communication to us.
Right.
Probably on Tuesday, it looked like things were getting sketchy. So a rumor started. We'd heard about the suicide, which this guy did jump off the railing, kill himself. But then we heard that a black man had raped like a 7-year-old girl, white girl, and then it turned to 2 girls. Then about 6 hours later, it switched to being a white guy who had raped 2 little black girls and slit their throats, and things became uneasy, and people were getting scared and frustrated. There was the generators kicked in because our electricity went off shortly after the storm. Lighting was only about 50%. There was no longer any running water. There was no longer any flushing of toilets. You would have to use your MRE napkin as your toilet paper. It was just horrific conditions. Best I can describe is living in an outhouse for a week with 90% humidity, 95-degree temperatures.
Except with an outhouse, at least you got lime or something to cover it up with it. You can get rid of the smell. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when people thought there were molesters on the loose, that must have been just horrible for people. I mean, because you got nowhere to verify those stories or anything.
Right. It took on like the little telephone game, or in grade school.
Right, because it gets worse and worse. Yeah.
And it goes around the circle, and it's all screwed up. And again, nobody could verify anything for us. And you know, we believed the worst. We were hearing some things on the boom boxes about stuff in the city going on, the helicopter shootings, which later turned out to be false, the rapes. I didn't hear about the eating of babies in the Superdome till after I got out, but that might have been Fox News, I'm not sure.
I would be surprised. I'm surprised. I mean, it seems to me that you must have had just a continual sense of panic building up in you, people.
It was, and it was, you know, people deal with that in different ways. Some got around in circles and prayed, other people broke down. I, myself, would just continually walk around the inside of the dome, making little stories in my mind about who this person might be, this La Jolla socialite, or is this person talking to themselves because they have Tourette's. For the most part, people, though, were still very helpful to each other, and looking out for the kids and the women and the medical patients. I would say overall it was maybe 85% black and 10 to 15% white, 5% others. There were a lot of families in there. It wasn't just gangs, it wasn't just homeless people, it wasn't just drug addicts.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, who are you with? Because the popular perception, especially popular, if you talk to anybody who watches the conservative press, they'll tell you there's a bunch of homeless people or gang members or the dregs of society who ended up in the dome. And why are we feeling sorry for these people anyway? But who are the people that you were in the dome with?
Okay.
That you came in contact with?
The first was 2 local guys who, probably in their early 20s, they were good friends. We just hung out together, looked out after everybody's luggage. The vast majority, I would say, were New Orleans families. There were a lot of interracial couples.
Yeah.
There were people who, judging a book by its cover, looked like gang members. There were, I'm sure, a lot of alcoholics, drug addicts who didn't have their fixes, but I was really overall surprised that things were in more control than they were.
Yeah.
People were even the lines to get bottled water, there were people yelling out, you know, if they're going to stop serving this in 5 minutes, make sure all the kids get their water first.
Yeah.
And I did see people breaking into vending machines and trying to get ice, and the National Guard came and took them down. And but again, it's maybe 5% at the most are the bad apples, and 95% of the people were caring people.
This is a 5% that we're going to hear about, especially from, say, Fox News. What was it like when you were hearing these stories from the outside world, especially ones you can't verify, and as you're hearing the especially dark, terrible stories from the outside world?
It added to the terror. It added to the total groupthink that was taking over. We did realize, though, that first we were going to get out, and then they said that the levees broke, and so we knew more people were coming in, being brought to the Superdome, and that was fine. We did hear one thing that brought on more terror was we heard that on Friday, in about 4 days, another hurricane was coming. That was totally untrue.
Right.
But that was like, how are we going to deal with that?
Yeah.
Every little thing took on a life of its own.
When more and more people were coming in, did anybody ever feel like we just can't take any more people? Because I know the dome can handle more people, but that's under optimum conditions. When you got lighting and the toilets work,
Right. Yeah, there was a feeling we can't take any more, but there was no other place to take those people. I mean, unless we did a good operation of airlifting people out like we've done in other countries. We didn't know when the food and the water would run out. Again, when you went to the bathroom, you were straddling a toilet and lifting your package and just taking a crap where you could crap. And it was, to me, the saddest thing was walking around the arena area above the field, and there were little kids who were sleeping on urine and feces-soaked cardboard, and that just brought tears to my eyes. And that was a very common sight. People had to wear, masks over just because the odor was so bad. One thing that I feel where ignorance is bliss is after the water started rising, it came within about 6 to 4 inches of the generators. I was not aware of that, but had that happened, it would have been total darkness, and it may have been total chaos.
What was it, when you talk about lights going out, was it total darkness when the lights went out?
No, it wasn't total darkness. When the electricity went out, the generators kicked in right away. It was probably about 50% lighting. It was dim, but you could still see people. The bathrooms were pretty dark, though, so sometimes you'd have an escort go in there.
I guess that would be an adventure in itself, going into the bathroom.
Yeah.
Did you reach a point where you thought, we're just never going to get out of this place? What was it like outside the doors? Okay. I mean, did anybody look outside the doors? I mean, could you look outside the doors? Or?
When the hurricane was going on Monday morning, they kept us away from the windows, so if there was any debris that blew through. Finally, on Tuesday, they did let us go outside on the forum level. We were not allowed to leave. There were armed guards around there.
Right.
It was still better outside, but it was still 90, 95 degrees, 90% humidity.
Right.
Horrid stench. People who were frustrated, they told us it was martial law in the city. You would either be arrested or shot if you tried to leave.
Right. So what was it like when you're finally going to get out of this place?
Okay. Well, I was extremely fortunate. A guy from Denmark approached me who had been staying at the youth hostel with about 10 other people.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you want to join our group?" And I went and looked at the group, and they were very segregated. It was mainly white group, and I didn't want to segregate with them. I felt very comfortable where I was at.
Right.
So I said, "No, thanks," and then went back to where I was sitting. Well, a little bit later, I thought one of the guys had stolen some food out of my suitcase, which I was mistaken. He had not at all, but that gave me the impetus to maybe think, I better not hang with these guys, and I'll go join this other group.
Well, I guess in that kind of situation, paranoia would come naturally.
Absolutely, yeah. So I spent Sunday, Monday, Tuesday night in the Superdome. On Wednesday, a guy from Australia in this group, which had grown to about 100, arranged one of the National Guardsmen to get us out. And they led us with armed guard, with their M16s, groups of 10, over to the sports arena next door. They told us, do not laugh, do not smile, do not talk to anybody, do not answer any questions, or it will likely incite a riot.
Right.
Because we would get this favorite treatment.
Yeah.
So that was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday night in the Superdome, Wednesday over to the sports arena where we helped out medical patients, and that was really rewarding, but very sad. There were probably 200 elderly people. Only a few had wheelchairs. The others were being carted around on crates, in chairs, and we spent hours just fanning them with cardboard, cleaning up, doing anything we could.
I mean, what kind of things were you able to do for these people?
There were actually a couple in our group who were medical students out from Taiwan. They were able to help out. Most of it was comforting them, transporting them around, bringing them water, assisting the few doctors that were there in the area. But again, they had run out of medicine that was needed. We did shifts, like 4-hour shifts, then slept overnight. But it kept our minds occupied. We knew that we were doing something great. But the condition in the sports arena wasn't too much better than in the Superdome.
Yeah. So how many people do you think were being treated?
I would guess, all I can say is hundreds and hundreds between the Superdome and the sports arena.
Wow.
Because new people were being brought in by helicopter and boat all the time to be treated there in this triage center. I was amazed that hundreds didn't die, medical patients in the Superdome.
Do you see people have to be treated just for panic?
There were people who were freaking out, yeah, and I don't know if there were any psychologists, counselors on duty.
Right.
There were ministers there who volunteered and
Right.
came in and did their best, and people would pray. But yeah, there were family fights, people arguing, going off on each other for whatever reason.
If you had a dysfunctional family to start with,
Yeah, it was a
we could
real
laugh
challenge.
now, you know. So as you're getting closer to getting away from that area, what was it like?
Okay. We could see the floodwater all around. We spent the one night, Wednesday night at the sports arena. Then on Thursday, they had to smuggle us in to the Hyatt Regency where the mayor was staying, and that's right close by. But it was still that attitude, we cannot let anybody back at the Superdome know that we got this privileged treatment or there could be potential rioting.
Right.
There were guests staying at the Hyatt Regency at that time, and they were all shifted over to one side of the building because the winds had actually blown furniture through the hallways, into the hallways, and broken windows. Our group of 100 now, at one point, there was some woman who was staying there in the lobby, and she became hysterical and started screaming, "They're coming, they're coming, they're coming." And as a whole group, we just thought, okay, the worst has happened. The 400 National Guardsmen were taken over, and they've gotten their guns and they're coming to get us. And that was the feeling. So we just panicked and ran to the other side of the lobby, and a doctor later read us the riot act, which is what we deserved. But at the same time, it was another case of lack of communication. When we were brought into this new place, and we had been through so much, somebody could have just said, the mayor is staying here,
you didn't know what
you're
the
in a
hell.
guarded
You didn't know
place.
what the hell to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Just assure us that this is a safe place to be at. And so we slept, the final night, Thursday night, we slept in a ballroom that was just horrific. It's where they kept their garbage. It was even hotter in there. But still, we were lucky. We were fortunate. We were no longer in the Superdome. We spent the night there. About 25 people in our group actually looted the bar of the Hyatt Regency and stole a bunch of beer and were caught. Then on Friday...
What are they going to do to you if you steal beer, you know?
Well, they threatened. There were a lot of 20-somethings from Europe, Australia, and they said the management is considering kicking us out on the streets. And it was a scare tactic to them. We knew that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Friday, the buses started arriving, and it was a great relief. But I did want to, I wrote a book, Diary from the Dome, Reflections on Fear and Privilege During Katrina, because I wanted to correct some of the media reports, and also some of the Australians in our group made statements to BBC and the Australian press about what conditions were like in the Superdome. And they said 95% of the people in there were gang members, 95% of the people were on drugs, we were stepping over dead bodies. And for them, that really was their reality. They thought they were seeing
and they're a small part of the dome.
Right. And they were scared to death, as we all were. And it could have been much more volatile than it was. But it was important to correct that.
Of course, that gets picked up.
Right.
And of course, it's sensationalistic too. It gets picked up and trumpeted all over the place.
Yeah.
It was like, I saw a picture. It was on the cover of a magazine. It showed two white people. It said, those are white people, and they were foraging for food in New Orleans. Then another photograph of two black people, it said, two looters in New Orleans.
Yeah. Which is very poignant when the 25 white people from our group were looting the bar, which they didn't need to do. There was a black woman from the health department who pointed them and said, look, your group is a bunch of looters. And, she was right on.
Yeah.
We finally got bused to Dallas on Friday, and we were just so thrilled. But we were still being treated like criminals. We had armed guard around us, partially to protect anybody from hijacking the bus. But when we had gotten into Texas, we were treated as we were just criminals. We were gotten off the bus. They put plastic on all the covers. They took away the British guy's beer. We had to go through inspection and metal detectors, and it was like, whoa, we're beaten down. Why are we being treated like this? Also on the way, about 50 miles outside of New Orleans, the bus in front of us overturned, And while we had been in a heightened state finally to be getting out of the city,
Yeah.
that happened. Our bus driver was a hero. He turned around, got off the next off-ramp, called for help, was going through traffic, pulled up to the bus, which had now caught on fire, and we later learned that one person died in that and 17 people injured, but he helped pull the people off. After that, we were again somber.
Yeah.
And it was just a surreal experience.
I think part of your reason for your treatment was because so many people were looking at these terrible scare stories coming out of New Orleans, that everybody got tarred with the same brush, and nobody saw you as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I know I've talked to Sergeant Garland Ogden, who was actually our savior. He got us out early. But he was basically saying that a lot of his National Guards people, colleagues, were being too rough and weren't understanding that these people were frustrated. We just needed some assurances, some communication, some hope. And there was also a guy I've talked to online who was a pastor for Louisiana National Guard, and he too was trying to tell the soldiers, be gentle, be gentle. You don't always need to use your guns.
Well, some people just got indicted in Louisiana because they were actually turning people back on the bridge. And actually, I think they shot somebody.
Yeah.
Some cops. They were not letting people leave New Orleans.
Right.
On foot.
Right. These were unarmed citizens who were simply trying to
save their own lives.
Save their own lives, survival. And apparently 2 or 3 of them were shot dead, unarmed. Another 8 or 10 are being investigated by the Justice Department for covering up the whole story.
Yeah.
And the irony is, New Orleans citizens may have had more to fear from their own police department than from, their fellow citizens. Obviously, there was looting, there was violence going on in the city, and people were scared. But there have been many other cases too that Justice Department is looking into right now regarding New Orleans Police Department deserting their post, shooting unarmed people, and then covering it up.
When you finally got out of the situation, and you became aware of the news stories, what was your reaction to that? Your emotional reaction to that?
The first actual news coverage I saw was on the airport in Denver, going back to San Diego, where I was living at the time. And I was watching CNN and just broke down crying. I mean, I just couldn't deal with it. When we were in the Hyatt Regency and we were paranoid, we put on these caution tapes to identify our own group of 100.
Right.
It was just a symbolic thing, but it was very important, and all of us kept wearing those for a few days after. When I got on the plane heading from Denver to San Diego, the waitress or the stewardess asked me about it, and I explained, and she said, "Well, could I announce to everybody on the plane who you are and this type of stuff?" And I said, "Sure." And I'm just kind of shy about it all, and they just immediately broke into a big applause, and I teared up then. It was a very emotional thing. My partner and I, we watched a recent Dateline show.
You're making me cry. We got to skip that. Okay.
We watched a Dateline show recently, Brian Williams inside the Superdome and reporting on the convention center, and it brought us both to tears because I thought the most accurate and moving thing. And looking back, I was extremely fortunate to have been in the Superdome. Convention center people didn't have any food and water. I
know, and you think of the people on the roofs. And you think in terms of a disaster, it was also the worst disaster. Our government created this disaster. Because they made it worse.
Yeah, it's very important people know that it was a natural disaster for Mississippi Gulf Coast. I mean, it slammed, wiped out, obliterated towns along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But in New Orleans, it came and went, it did some damage, but it was the following day when the levees really had the big breach breaking, and most of the death and destruction was caused by the faulty Army Corps of Engineers levees. And when we were just back for the 5-year reunion of Katrina, we saw a new Harry Shearer documentary called The Big Uneasy, and it's an expose on the levees, an excellent movie.
They still haven't fixed the levees, have they?
The parts that broke, they've reinforced, so they're supposed to be much stronger, but the problem still exists in the other areas. And Harry Shearer's point was, bring in the Dutch, spend 2 months worth of Iraqi
Find out
funding,
how they do it.
to get it right.
Yeah.
So it is still vulnerable. There have been improvements, but
Yeah.
this was just a Category 3 storm, not a Category 5 storm when it hit
I know. Yeah.
to the east of New Orleans.
What about post-traumatic stress?
They've said about 33% of the children who were there are still suffering post-traumatic stress. I know that in our group of 100, I know of 2 or 3 people who are. Personally, I drink more, but that's been the only effect, and I'm not worried about that. I think writing is very therapeutic, talking about it, and if you go to New Orleans today, 5 years later, you'll still hear people telling their stories, and they need to tell their stories.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of people, I've heard people say, "Oh, why are they talking about this? You know, we need to put something else on TV." You know, and I think people don't understand. You know, and we live in a time when Michael Jackson dies, and they inundate the airways with Michael Jackson retrospectives. You know, Michael Jackson's been dead for 6 weeks. Let's put a retrospective on. You know, and I think it's important that people cover and people talk about what happened because I think there's still lessons to be learned from it.
It made me much more sensitive to those who go into combat. I don't know how you would deal with combat and come out not unaffected. And I know, you know, people in Auschwitz didn't talk about their experiences for 40, 50 years. They're just opening up. So, and this was just a small thing for 1 week. I was very fortunate that I didn't lose any family members, any home, anything like that. It was one of those experiences I never want to go through again, but I learned a lot, both the best behavior and the worst behavior in people.
I think it must challenge a lot of people's beliefs in themselves and the universe and even their religious beliefs.
Very much so. When something happens like this, though, people do come together. It didn't matter your color, your religion, socioeconomic status. The only disappointment in our minds was we really thought in America there was a safety net and nothing like this could ever happen. You know, why weren't we being airlifted? Why weren't our resources? It was much bigger than 9/11, Oklahoma City bombing, the Northridge earthquake in California, and the San Diego wildfires, which I experienced. All of those combined, this was bigger, yet we were getting less federal help.
There's a very cynical answer to that.
I'll let you.
and the reason is because of at least the economic status of most of the people, let alone the fact that most of them were black and the fact that most of them were poor.
Yeah.
You, of course, writing this book has been a tremendous outlet for you.
Yeah.
And being able to talk about your experiences.
Yeah, it's very therapeutic, and I've had a lot of people contact me since then. In fact, 3 days ago, I finally got to have a reunion with the National Guardsman, the sergeant.
Really?
Who we went out drinking, got drunk 2 nights, and he shared a lot of stories, and that was really good. I met a woman who happened to be in the Superdome as well, who was from San Diego at the time, who was in our group, and she's now moved to New Orleans and a bartender down there. And talked to another woman who wants to write a book about Katrina. So, and also the Louisiana National Guard pastor has been in contact with me, and we've been emailing our various stories.
So how long did it take you to write the book?
I would say 6 months. It all started out just when I got back to work. I was working at the library at UC San Diego, and people wanted to know what happened, so I sent out a mass email to the entire mailing list of 200, and I just could not stop writing. I just could not stop writing. Then a local newspaper picked it up, somebody sent it to that, and then somebody suggested you need to write a book about this, so I did that.
Were there times when you were writing the book when you just couldn't write? When you thought, I just can't go on with this, or I have to take a break for a while because it's so painful?
Just short periods. I mean, I would have mental blocks, and there were times when I would tear up.
Yeah.
A glass of wine helped. And
it's very therapeutic.
Yeah, writing till 3, 4, 5 in the morning. That's when I do my best writing.
Yeah. Since the book has come out, and you have a website, and what's people's reaction been to it?
Surprisingly, my more conservative friends seem to like it more than my progressive friends. I don't know why that is.
So why is that? Why is that, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they've just gotten to know me better as a person. It's been varied. It's been overall very good reviews, but there have been some people who called me, you know, like an armchair liberal, racist. I don't know if they were upset that we got the favored treatment, got out early. It's been overall very good.
You know what? I wasn't in the Dome, and I wasn't in New Orleans. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, if they said to me, you want to get out, I'd be jumping at the chance.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and go, no, I'd hang out with everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to play that kind of stupid game here with you, you know?
Yeah. I wrote in there that, you know, we all feel very guilty that we got out, but there's not one of the 100 of us that would have traded places. It was that horrible conditions, and you didn't know if you'd make it or not.
Right.
It's basic survival.
And I really don't think anybody has the right. Anybody who wasn't in the Dome has a right to judge you.
Yeah. That's how I feel exactly towards those doctors and nurses who have been brought up on medical charges for letting their patients die after Katrina.
Yeah.
I mean, they stayed. They showed up for their
That's right.
shifts. They did their very best. And some states have laws protecting people who do their very best. And
That's right.
it pains me to see that these doctors stayed up all night long doing the best they could to alleviate the pain, and people were going to die.
Yeah, I think there are certain situations where people just don't have the right to judge someone else.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of interesting that you have made contact with a lot of people through this.
Yeah. We also have a Yahoo group we started called Section 113, and that was the group of 100 of us who still
Section
wanted
113?
Yeah, that's where we ended up sitting in the Superdome, and a lot of people have just stayed in contact. About 55 of us now are on that group of 100 who just want to remain in contact. There's people from New Zealand, Taiwan, Australia.
What about these Australians who exaggerate everything?
Well, you know, that was their reality. That was their reality. They were definitely being racist in what they were seeing and saying. I actually talked to one of them on the phone the other day, and there's no bad feelings as far as I know.
Yeah.
I'm sure they weren't happy with some of the things I wrote in the book, but at the other hand, I praise them too because they took a lot of leadership roles and helped get us out.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, this sort of thing could happen anywhere in the country, and people just don't know when it could happen to their community.
Exactly. If you go to levees.org, it was started by a woman in New Orleans, and it talks about how vulnerable so many counties in the United States are. About approximately 55% of the population live in counties protected by Army Corps of Engineers and/or vulnerable levees.
Right.
And I grew up in Sacramento, and that is the #1 most vulnerable area, even more for flooding because of the faulty levees.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and people keep saying that New Orleans is all under sea level. It isn't. So about 50% of it is below sea level. Manhattan's below sea level. Most coastal cities, which possess large populations, are below sea level. You know, you might live in Tornado Alley, you might live in a fire area. We all need to be aware that we are more vulnerable than we think. And how do we deal with these things? I would recommend people keep a week's worth of provisions for their families, not just 72 hours. Check out rumors. When you hear rumors, check out, is it for real? Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And don't go to your basic instinct of shoot. Don't go to your basic instinct of somebody's different color than yourself, so they must be the enemy.
Right.
Most people are turn to each other in those desperate times to help each other.
I think people are basically good, and I think certainly the stories you recounted today show that people are basically look out for one another. So, well, Paul, I want to thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Richard.
And I want to thank you for bringing the pictures that we've shown throughout the show. And anyway, I wish you luck with your book, and I hope something like this never happens to you again.
Right. I don't want to write a sequel.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you all for watching. I will see you next week.
for social change. They fought against tyrants. They fought for human rights. Yet behind these achievements are individuals who waged a more personal war. They fought the struggle against mental illness, and they won.
For millions of years, they ruled the earth, and then they vanished. What really caused the dinosaurs to become extinct? Was it a giant asteroid crashing to Earth? Was it massive volcanoes erupting around the world? Was it a sudden change in climate? Or was it that they just weren't financially prepared to live out their later years? How can you avoid the dinosaurs' fate? By making U.S. savings bonds part of your retirement savings program. Ask your banker or employer. U.S. savings bonds, the safe and easy way to make sure you're financially prepared for your later years.
Hi, I'm Pamela Foster, author of Ridgeline. You're watching Fayetteville Public Access Television.
Bagworms, the larval form of certain moths, they prey on juniper and cedar trees, fashioning protective individual silk bags, usually covered with plant debris. Okay, that's the end of the title. Now for the poem. They know it will never happen again, but she visits him, and they pluck bagworms from the tree over his drive, watch them emerge through silken socks and rough outer clothes. She knows she will not tell him her dreams of him. He knows he will not reveal that he wants her to want him. She still hungers for the texture of his pitted teeth against her tongue. He remembers their first night when he wore his silk underwear. Damn bagworms, they chorus, throwing all they can find on the rocks. She watches him burn them, sees them shrivel and pop, make flames too hot to grow old. They know it will never happen again, but in the thoughts they hold between them, it has never stopped.
As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day.
Correcticus was just passing by. Now the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the noses on the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the noses on the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the noses on the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the noses on the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the boys who put the powder on the noses of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the fascinating witches put the scintillating stitches in the breeches of the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the fascinating witches put the scintillating stitches in the breeches of the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the fascinating witches put the scintillating stitches in the breeches of the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now the fascinating witches put the scintillating stitches in the breeches of the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus was just passing by. Now if you want to take a picture of the fascinating witches put the scintillating stitches in the breeches of the boys who put the powder on the noses of the faces of the ladies of the harem of the court of King Correcticus, you're too late.
Why?
Because they just passed by.
I was just thinking about writing you a letter, let you know what's going on. There hasn't been much work and I've lost a little weight, but I'm gonna keep on keeping on. I met a lot of really nice people, there's still quite a few of them left around. I'm not getting very rich, but I'm getting real happy, so I'm writing every word of this town. And when I'm through, I'm sending it to you in a very, very special song. It might make a day just a little bit brighter, and you might want to sing along. Singing nine, 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 nine. The ones I love, they miss me. You know I miss them too. But I play guitar in a traveling band, that's what I wanted to do. And though this song, it may sound sad, it's not really sad at all. 'Cause things are going to get a whole lot better, but I thought I was put it on. A new day's gonna be coming my way, it's gonna be coming soon. But until it does, I'll just keep smiling and I keep on singing this tune. Singing nine, 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 nine.
began to shout and it started the investigation. It was against the law. It was against the law. What your mama saw, it was against the law. Mama looked down and spit on the ground every time my name gets mentioned. And the papa said, boy, if I catch that boy, I'm gonna stick him in the house of detention. Well, I'm on my way. I don't know where I'm going. I'm on my way. I'm taking my time, but I don't know where. Goodbye, Rosie, the queen of Corona. See me and Julio down by the schoolyard. See me and Julio down by the schoolyard. A couple of days they come and take me away and they press that story. And when the radical priests come and give me release, we're all on the cover of Newsweek. Well, I'm on my way. I don't know where I'm going. I'm on my way. I'm taking my time, but I don't know where. Goodbye, Rosie, the queen of Corona. See me and Julio down by the schoolyard. 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 I'm on my way. I don't know where I'm going. I'm on my way. I'm taking my time, but I don't know where. Goodbye, Rosie, the queen of Corona. See me and Julio down by the schoolyard. 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 See me and Julio down by the schoolyard.
Hi, I'm Pamela Foster, author of Ridgeline. You're watching Fayetteville Public Access Television.
They fought for social change. They fought against tyrants. They fought for human rights. Yet behind these achievements are individuals who waged a more personal war. They fought the struggle against mental illness, and they won.
For millions of years, they ruled the earth, and then they vanished. What really caused the dinosaurs to become extinct? Was it a giant asteroid crashing to Earth? Was it massive volcanoes erupting around the world? Was it a sudden change in climate? Or was it that they just weren't financially prepared to live out their later years? How can you avoid the dinosaur's fate? By making U.S. savings bonds part of your retirement savings program. Ask your banker or employer. U.S. savings bonds, the safe and easy way to make sure you're financially prepared for your later years.
Politics in general and jobs that don't pay enough, 40-hour work weeks, books full of boring stuff, schools that should teach but kids don't learn a thing. These are a few of my least favorite things. Healthcare that won't heal and how people treat the earth, paying tolls and taxes, disbelief in self-worth, bitter cold winters that cut into spring. These are a few of my least favorite things. Religions that claim they're true, don't get me started. Standards that double and people cold-hearted. Judgment and bias when freedom don't ring. These are a few of my least favorite things. All the lying, all the killing. When I'm depressed and sad, I add that to all of my least favorite things, and then I feel really bad. Feel like Julie Andrews or something.